Next is a panel, our first of 3 panels, and this is the Alaska Native Language Center Legacy Panel. That means people from the past. I'm going to be moderating this, and the people who are going to be in this panel of the legacy panel is, again, Dr. Edna MacLean. No introduction because we just heard her, and thank you so much. Next person in the panel is Dr. Phyllis Morrow, who's a former dean of the College of Liberal Arts here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Her teaching and research was on oral traditions, cultural linguistics, aspects of interactions in Alaska. And she began studying Yukdun in the 1970s when she and her husband, Chase Hensel, moved to Alaska. She eventually served as a director of the Yukdun Kanarigamak Jaliwik at Kuskokwim Community College, where she worked with a team to write, edit, and publish Yupik readers, college textbooks, adult literacy materials, and translator interpreted lexicons, transcribe Yupik traditional stories, and team up with Alaska Native language linguists. And for those of you who know Yukdun, Yupikdun, she was involved with that. And so she also worked with the Lower Kuskokwim School District Bilingual Multicultural Education Center, and developing high school curriculum and materials for Yupik speakers in collaboration with other staff and Yupik elders and teachers in the communities. Guyana Phyllis. And Dr. Chase Hensel. He began his learning Yukdun in the late 1970s while living in Bethel and working with the Kuskokwim Community College, or Kuskokwim, it was something else back then, KCC, Kuskokwim Community College. And so after earning his PhD, he taught introductory Yupik grammar at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, worked with the Yupik School District for 2 years to develop a Yupik language and culture curriculum, worked with Chugach Corporation staff on an Unangach language and culture curriculum. He was the evaluator for 2 different Alaska Native Language Center sponsored adult native learning grants, and thank you for all that amazing work that you did to support those. He has also served as an expert witness on several legal cases regarding linguistic issues, including the successful 2001 challenge on Alaska's official English statute. So Guyana Chase for that. If I could have all 3 of you come and join me at these wonderful soft chairs. So should I share this, or are they going to share that with?
I think we're just going to use the one by question.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question.
What's that?
You have to really, I'm hard of hearing.
I told Cajon that I'll introduce you to her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, come on.
You have them written down, that was the question.
Yeah, I did. And so thank you, folks. And this is our first panel. I'll start from there. I'll let you rest. And so for those of you who are just joining us, there's water next to your feet there. And so again, welcome, folks. And this is the legacy panel. And I'm really, really excited to have, or to hear and learn from these folks who've been working with Alaska Native languages for decades. And so again, Guyana for being here, Guyana for having done the amazing work that you've done. So with that, I'm just going to go down and answer. And if I could give you, I'll give you a question or ask you a question if you could answer, please. The first one is, can you share about the Alaska Native Language? Can you share about what the Alaska Native Language Center was like when you first started here? And how did it change during your time?
All right, I'll give a stab at that. So first I should say that Phyllis and I are both anthropologists, not linguists. So in some ways in many ways we really benefited from ANLC. I mean, we started learning Yupik in Seattle with Fanny Ayagaloria Slayton, a woman from Napakiak who was living in Seattle, and we had a bootleg copy of Steve's grammar, the Blue Grammar, before it was published, that, a friend of a friend of a friend knew somebody who'd been in Bethel. And so when we arrived in 77, the ANLC was this like going concern. There was all this stuff going on. It just seemed like there were, there was all kinds of action. And we sort of felt like it was tremendously good luck for us to be able to learn from all of these people. Maybe I'll pass the next.
Well, I guess if we're going chronologically, I should say that when we showed up in 77 and we had a little bit of Yuchtun by proxy from this manuscript under our belts and the help of Fanny, we got swept up by Irene Reed, which was very much the kind of thing Irene did. And she gave us, we were staying here at the university and in a dorm room, and Irene said, come stay with me on Wolf Run. And there in Wolf Run was this group of linguists. And so Jeff Lear was there and Larry Kaplan was there. And of course we met Mike Krause, and we met, we enrolled in Steve's class. We started to meet people who were working on Yuchtun, who were Yuchtun speakers, and people who were learning it alongside us, including Chuna McIntyre was in that class, as I recall. But at that point, what was called the primary Eskimo program that you just heard about from other folks, what was a going concern in the Yupik area. And Michael Krause was, Irene Reed and Michael Krause kind of had two flavors of action. And it was kind of, you could tell this by what they were called. There was Dr. Krause and there was Irene. And Dr. Krause was very public and loud, and he made political points, and he was a needle in everybody's side, and he had this way of carrying the mission. And Itarwak, Irene, was a people person, and she worked to collaborate with groups who were new at this. This was all, working on languages was something that they were just starting, and she soothed some ruffled feathers, and together they were a great team. And I'm just going to say one other thing, which is just that from the beginning, ANLC was working on, research on the languages and materials development. That was really pretty much out the gate. Teaching was there, both training teachers, as Dr. MacLean talked about, and just teaching the language pretty soon. Preservation and access to materials that had been very widely dispersed and often were, buried on somebody's school shelf somewhere. and policy issues. So maybe I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Okay, thank you. When I first started at the Alaska Native Language Center, I was really impressed by the sharing of information between people, like Dr. Krause, Jeff Lair, and others who are working on languages held their conferences or their discussions right in the open. And you could sit down and listen to what they were arguing about or what kind of evidence that they were looking for, and then be able to participate in the unveiling of the knowledge of a particular language. Like, oh, that also happens in Inupiaq, I might say to someone who said, this happens in Yupik. And then we built upon that. And that continued until I left ANLC in 1987. So that kind of learning and sharing of information was a joy to really participate in, because then whatever you contributed was appreciated, and it helped to grow the knowledge that we were trying to accumulate in each of our languages. So we built upon each other. But I'm hoping that that process is, that sharing of information is still happening at ANLC, and hope it never stopped. And the other one that I mentioned earlier was that most of our students were fluent in their languages when they came to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So it was a very good situation for those of us who were teaching, because we also explored that the knowledge of our languages with our students. And they also had a lot to contribute, because some of them were older speakers than we were. And they had different perspectives on how to teach a certain topic or that topic. So in that sense, I guess the difference has been the students probably are not as literate, are not as fluent as they once were before. So.
Liana, again, thank you for sharing your story, the story that we've never heard. So because of times, this is 40 plus years ago. And so thank you for sharing your history. And so the next question is, what prompted ANLC to move forward in documenting these languages at that time when researchers felt that Alaska Native languages were becoming endangered?
So a bunch of things were happening in the country and in the state, I think, at that time. So, this is just after ANCSA and the formation of Native corporations. And so there were Native people were taking control and in control in ways that had been difficult for them to manage before, or that they've been completely blocked from before. People were beginning to talk openly, I think, in a different kind of way about the kind of treatment that they had had, the kind of suppression of language at boarding schools, and by the culture coming in. And so, and also it was like there was more and more recognition that was kind of the twin poles of subsistence and language were really vital to Native culture. And so it was very much in the air, and this was as you heard Larry Kaplan talk about, the bilingualism, was just sort of starting in the country. So I think that'd be the first thing that I would say in terms of why then.
I love this because Chase and I, of course, sat down and made some notes on these questions. So he gets to do them first. So I'm left with, wait, but you basically came through with all our points. But one point I wanted to make that kind of bridges the two topics we were just talking about was when we're talking about the kind of collaboration and this sort of real intellectual kind of foment about how do you studying Indigenous languages and teaching Indigenous languages, and how does that relate to history of schooling and the future of schooling and land claims and subsistence and all of the other kinds of issues that were there. One of the things I wanted to mention was that from the beginning, ANLC also collaborated with or corresponded with people around the world. And actually, when I was just looking through some things for this, I don't even know why I have this, but I just bumped into, there's some letter here that was in my possession. It's directed to Dr. Krause, and it's from the Ministry for Greenland. And it's, letting him know it came with a book that had been published. And they were clearly not only conversing with other linguists who'd studied related languages elsewhere, but gathering materials from other places that could be an inspiration or that you could debate. You could think about their strong points and their weak points. So that was in the air as well. And also when we talk about the sort of progressive changes in time, the movement has been more and more, in the direction of ownership of these processes by Alaskan Native speakers and people who are concerned about survival of Alaskan Native languages. That was the legacy.
As I recall, it was an urgent mission to document as much as the elders knew at that time. And elders were were our most fluent and knowledgeable speakers. So the rate of elders leaving our villages by dying was crucial. So it was an urgent mission to establish as much as we could about the various languages, like in Inupiaq, a word associated with a certain activity in hunting that might have existed for hundreds of years, but maybe with the introduction of new hunting tools, that word no longer had as much meaning as it did then. So it was urgent to record the meaning behind this word and put it down as quickly as possible. So it was not just a quest for symbols and writing systems, and also not just for the grammar of the language, but also for the content of the meaning of each of these words that they were exploring. So I think Dr. Krause and Jeff Lair and others, and us too, realized that urgency that was in documenting what the elders knew and how certain experts within our own languages dealt with certain hunting techniques and other tools, like, for example, the introduction of the rifle. So new words were created. For Inupiaq, we created a new word for suppun, which is from supi, which means to blow out air. And the gun did that. It blew out air through its mechanism, the long barrel. And it was a time also of at that time in the 70s on the North Slope, the Greenlanders and the Canadians and the Alaskan Inuit were getting together. And Mayor Eben Hobson at that time was very interested in developing a common writing system. So the focus on phonology came up. So people like Dr. Larry Kaplan, who studied the phonology of Inupiaq, was very helpful in looking at the different distributions. So Greenland and Canada and Alaska, Inupiaq, shared a common language with different dialects, but we had different ways of saying things. So, and we also had 3 or 4, maybe even 5 different ways of writing that particular word. So there was a quest also for a common writing system or for a more common writing system. So there were urgencies of every kind.
Juliana, because of time, I wish we could I wish we could sit here all day because I could listen to you share your stories. But I'm going to lead toward closing this by asking two more questions. And one of them is having had your spirit experience with Alaska Native Language Center for many decades, what is your assignment for the next generation of ANLC faculty and students?
Why don't we start with
Okay, one thing that I would focus on would be the giving the students who are in your four-year programs, learning a certain language, Inupiaq or Yupik or any of the Athabascan languages, the opportunity to experience hearing that language throughout their 4 years. So maybe what I would ask you to do would be to reinstate the Elder in Residence program that University of Alaska had for so many years while I was here, and have a language immersion sessions throughout the year with the speakers, the elder speakers, instead of, and the other one would be that's a big one, so I'll stop there.
My sense is that ANLC is still, those key elements of what needs to be done are similar over time at the broad outlines of them. Continue documentation in some way and teaching in various contexts and publishing and all of that. But two things to say about this. One is that that's become a lot more dispersed. And that's part of the evolution of ANLC. There are more places to publish. There are more people doing these things. It's not all having to happen in the same place. The second thing, which is more important, is that you don't need an old gasak to decide, make a recommendation for the future. I'm not going to give any assignments.
Yeah, I guess, I'm another old Gusik. But I would say that one of the things ANLC has always been is a center where a lot of things were happening and there was a lot of encouragement for people in various parts of the state who were working on language issues, native language issues in whatever way. And as Phyllis said, things are becoming more dispersed. There are people making a variety of materials, apps for your telephone and that sort of thing in native languages ways. So one of the things I would encourage ANLC is to continue to be a center, a clearinghouse, a place where people can find those sorts of things because there are a lot of particularly younger Alaska Native students, the younger Alaska Native people who would like to know more about their heritage languages. And so, that continues to be a major space for ANLC. Thank you.
The next and final one I'd like to share with you is what's your closing comment? I know there's a lot, but what's your closing comment for languages, for Alaska Native Language Center, for the future of the students and the faculty of UAF, and really statewide?
I think what I would encourage a Alaska Native Language Center to do would be to have a community focus in not just in Fairbanks, but also in the other parts of the state, like by developing partnerships with various institutions, like Alaska Native Language Center had a flourishing relationship with the North Slope Borough Inupiaq History, Language and Culture Commission in developing workshops and also in publishing materials, but also in making the expertise that is in Alaska Native Language Center known and taken advantage of in regional hubs, and which hopefully the hubs would then pass it on to the surrounding villages.
I think I'm most moved by the fact that when we first started, that our little slice of entering into this picture, it was difficult for Alaska Native people to stand up and speak their languages. It was difficult to be proud of that because there was a lot of pressure against it. It was difficult to learn from grandparents, and there were no materials. Now there are many more materials. There's much more just leadership and open pride, and this positive climate for expressing the need for Alaska Native languages to endure along with Alaska Native peoples. So I think my closing words are, this is a better place to be, even though it is the language, even if one still cannot learn from one's grandparents, who now progressively, more of them have passed on. This is still a good place to be.
And I just wanted to recognize the almost endless kindness of Yupik people who have taught me Yupik, have been willing to try to understand through my mistakes, and all of the meals. Yeah, it's just all of the kindness. So, I think that strength of kindness and community will continue to carry ANLC forward. So thank you.
To the next 50 years.
What is your vision?
My vision, well, thank you. Thank you for asking. My vision is to follow the lead of you folks who paved the way for us. And my vision is to see more Alaska Native faculty and Alaska Native leadership in not just Alaska Native Language Center, but the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we're getting there. And thanks to Dr. Charlene Stern and Oliver, the college under which we are now housed, I think we're getting there, not slowly, but in a very, very good pace. So with that, I'd like to kuya you guys dahil kapag mavet kuya nakpitli dialogy ilivinlu coming all the way from Fairbanks, Ariga. And so with that, again, I'd like to say Koyana, not just from me, but from all of us, to hear your story about where language was and where language needs to go.